Yes, another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Alex Donno alongside James Walker. We are down a man today. Frank Zaffere, as you can imagine this time of year, he's got family stuff heading into the Thanksgiving holiday tomorrow. So James and I will hold down the fort here today. I want to remind you guys before we get into the meat and the potatoes of our conversations here tonight, 5 Rounds where we talk combat sports each and every week. Usually we're on Thursdays. We're doing Wednesday this week for obvious reasons. I hope everybody enjoys their Thanksgiving tomorrow. But we are served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. The Quarterdeck makes this show possible. 5 Reasons Sports had an awesome watch party at the Quarterdeck Davie location yesterday, and the Heat actually won. Usually the Heat don't play so well on the nights of a 5 Reasons watch party. The curse was broken. They didn't play well, though, actually. But
they were down, right?
Yeah, they were down against a bad Detroit team until the fourth quarter, but Tyler Hero put on his Superman cape. So the Heat actually won on the night of a 5 Reasons watch party, which was awesome. Guys, I can't highly recommend enough the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. The seafood is always fresh. The fresh mahi-mahi. I love the buffalo shrimp. I love the sushi. There are so many options at the Quarterdeck. The burgers and sandwiches are great if you're not a seafood fan. Try the jerk chicken sandwich. That's a relatively new menu item. It's really good, really spicy. It's delicious. Guys, I'm sure the viewers of this show are always interested to know the Quarterdeck has every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover. You pay nothing at the door to watch a UFC pay-per-view at the Quarterdeck. Enjoy that delicious food and knock down the 2-for-1 drink specials. 2-for-1 happy hour is all day, every day. If you want to find the location nearest to you or check out their menu before you go, visit them on the web at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. And hello to our guy, Alex M., who's in bright and early. Let me introduce my co-host, James Walker. I am Alex Donno. He's James Walker. James, I hope your Thanksgiving preparations at home are going well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Everything's good. Pretty light on the preparations for Thanksgiving, man. We're actually going to order out. No turkey. Not a turkey guy.
That's not a bad way to go. Some of the best. I think I was going to say some of the best, but I think we've only done this once. There was one year where we didn't have a whole lot of family around because they were traveling, and we actually ate out on Thanksgiving, and it was fantastic. So there are different ways to do this.
That will be the Walkers this year.
Well, that is tremendous. So here's a bit of news, okay? And do you think, James, that this is just the usual Conor McGregor bravado? He's trying to talk himself or talk Dana White into granting his wish here. Conor McGregor, who's on the mend from that broken leg that he suffered in the third fight against Dustin Poirier. McGregor writes on social media, "Hi, lads, here goes," he said. "Clicks and the like, your boss and whatnot, the Mac, Santa Claus. I'm facing whoever the fuck has the lightweight title next," he said. "Deal with it. Take off your goggles and mark the trilogy unfinished. Deal with that too. The rest mentioned after this, deal with it." So McGregor says that when he is, and everything I've heard and seen is that his recovery is ahead of schedule. He's smashing the timetable. He's been doing some workouts and stuff. So he seems to be not that long from coming back from that leg injury. Conor McGregor, who is 1-3 in his last 4 fights, James, is claiming he's going to fight for the lightweight belt next. Because I think that the two answers to these different questions may not be the same. So I'll ask it two ways. A, Does he deserve it? And B, do you think he's going to get it?
Yeah, those are 2 different questions and 2 interesting questions. Does he deserve it? No way. No way. I mean, 1-4 if you count Mayweather, even though that was in boxing.
That's a good point.
He's really only won 1 fight since 2017. So I don't know any fighter on the roster who could do that and get a title shot on his comeback. So no, he absolutely doesn't deserve it. Even if you make him fight one opponent, I think that would have some justification, maybe not enough justification, but give him one top 5 opponent. Give him Michael Chandler. Give him some exciting fight in the top 5 for him to prove that he is still, Mystic Mac. I think in his mind, he's still that guy. He's still that guy 5 years ago at MSG with his hands behind his back against Eddie Alvarez. I think in his mind, he's still that guy. But in everyone else's mind, that has seen him over the last 4 years or so, he's no longer that guy. It hasn't even been close to being that dominant. So So no, he doesn't deserve it. Will he get it? I think that's more of a question that's harder to answer. And I think we'll find out, really. He's going to be the ultimate litmus test if the UFC is strictly about making money or if they are about the rankings and who's deserving and things like that. We've seen a lot of evidence on the contrary. I can name several fighters who have been deserving but haven't gotten title shots. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now, Carla Esparza, for example, right now. If just on the women's side, who has won some fights, has beaten the current champion, and hasn't, just hasn't gotten that fight because she isn't as marketable.
Think about how frustrated our guy Stipe Miocic is that he wasn't made a part of that interim title fight. He feels disrespected, and I understand why it's happening to Stipe, but it goes into your argument. I think the reason why Stipe gets passed over is he's just not very exciting, even though he's a longtime former champion. So the argument works both ways. Someone who's incredibly exciting, like Conor, is going to get opportunities he doesn't deserve, and a guy who is deserving by merit, but not that exciting, like Stipe, is going to get passed over.
Yep. And here's the wild card. What if Dustin Poirier beats Charles Oliveira?
Mm-hmm.
That makes it very tough for the UFC not to make that trilogy fight for the title, raise stakes, unfinished business. Really, that was the only part of the tweet that I kind of agree with, even though Conor lost, the last two, but he did break his leg on the last fight. Is that, you can make a case at least that there's unfinished business. So if Dustin Poirier wins the fight next month in December, I think there's a selling point for the UFC to make that matchup happen. It's a title fight. Some people kind of looked at Poirier-Conor 3 as the title fight in the summer, even though, Oliveira had the belt anyway. So I think they do have a selling point for that to happen, even though it's not fair to the rest of the division. So that'll be interesting to see. Now, Charles Oliveira wins. That's a whole nother bag that's worth discussing whether Conor should be in there against Oliveira. I think there's a better case against that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. That the only way that this could happen and that the UFC can make this seem like a somewhat logical sporting decision would be if Poirier wins the belt. And I think he will. Now, there are no guarantees in life because Charles Oliveira is a tough guy and he can win fights in a lot of different ways, right? He can knock you out, he can sub you, he can win a decision. I think Dustin Poirier is just better than he is, and him being a little bit bigger, packing more power. I think Dustin Poirier is going to win the belt. And yeah, like you said, if Dustin Poirier wins the belt, the UFC has a hook, right? Because it's not going to be nearly as egregious. Now, again, I look at a Conor McGregor who is 1-3 in his last 4 fights. And like you said, if you count boxing, now you probably shouldn't, but if you were to count the Mayweather thing, he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. It's criminal. Like, for an organization that still at least pretends, because they have rankings, right? And rankings haven't been around forever. Like, people forget. Like, you and I, we've been watching the UFC long enough to remember when official rankings, because websites have always done their own, but the official UFC rankings have only been around since around 2012 when they first got on Fox, because they're like, oh, the sport is mainstream. Now we need rankings. So you even have rankings. And if you were to give Conor McGregor 1-3 in his last 4 MMA fights, just a fast track title shot, it's just a slap in the face. And like our guy Alex M mentions here, Islam Makhachev, 9-fight winning streak. You'd be talking about passing over people like Islam to give Conor McGregor a title fight. It's not a good decision, however you slice it. But if Poirier does win the belt, you have your hook there, because Dana White even said it right after their fight when Conor McGregor, I thought, was on his way to losing that fight anyway. But to be fair, he could have come back. Like, I can't say 100% certainly that Dustin Poirier would have won that fight. I think he would have won that fight anyway if Conor hadn't broken the leg. That fast-tracked it, and it leaves some uncertainty. And Dana White said it after their 3rd fight when Conor broke his leg. White said, there's unfinished business here. This chapter is not closed. These guys are going to fight again. So money, 100%. Yep. If Dustin Poirier beats Charles Oliveira, I think that they could very well give a title shot to Conor. I don't have to like it, but I will watch it. All right. On the flip side, if Oliveira beats Poirier, there's no hook there whatsoever. And there are other exciting fights you can make for Conor. Like, if you don't have the built-in feud and grudge and the unfinished business, there's no reason to do Conor versus Oliveira for the title. Talking about unfinished business, you have an unsettled potential trilogy between Conor and Nate Diaz. I would love to see that fight. I would love to see this one as well. Another piece of unfinished business. Max Holloway, former featherweight champ, did an interview this past week on TMZ, and he claims, does Holloway, that he is on the short list to fight Conor. Like, he also talked about the possibilities of fighting Volkanovski again. There's also unfinished business there because I thought Holloway, should have won the last fight against Volkanovski, but the judges didn't go his way. So there's unfinished business there. But there's also unfinished business with Conor because he and Conor fought back in 2013, and Conor beat him by decision.
How old was Max then? Like 17? How old was Max in 2013?
He was like 20.
Probably like 21 or something.
Very young in Max Holloway's career. So Holloway lost to McGregor by decision 9 years ago, roughly. And since that time, Holloway has gotten so much better. And I don't think Conor has gotten any better since 2000. Yeah. He's pretty much the same guy that he was back then. So I would love to see the two of them scrap again. That would just be a special interest fight. And he claims, does Holloway, that he's on the short list for that. I wouldn't mind seeing that whatsoever.
Alex, let me provide the other side to that. Just playing the other side. What is in it for both Holloway and McGregor for that fight? Other than, it's a good fight and it's a good money fight and it's a rematch. But if Holloway wins, he's in the same spot he was anyway as the number one contender to Volkanovski. If Conor wins, does that really, does that put him closer to a title or anything? He's beating a guy from a smaller weight class, although a great fighter.
They probably do it at 155 though, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that seems kind of like a placeholder fight to me, as far as, not really advancing the ball, for anything. There's no title on the line, obviously. It probably, keeps Max on the shelf from facing Volkanovski for another year or, 8 months or so. I'm not as big a fan of that matchup right now. It's just the timing. It doesn't seem like there's nothing on the line. There's really nothing to be gained by either guy. If Holloway beats McGregor, it doesn't really do anything for him, I don't think, at this point.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate on that. I agree with you quite a bit on the Holloway side. As far as like moving the ball, I think that's completely irrelevant for Conor now. I think for Conor, it's just all about putting on the biggest possible fights and cashing checks. Holloway, though, he is somebody, and he's had his title run, and it was a good one. So, like, maybe at this point in Holloway's career, because for the lighter guys, for the people under, really under 170 pounds, I know the lightweight division is always stacked, but, the lighter guys, and Holloway, he's fought lightweight, but a featherweight, the people under 155 don't tend to make as much money because the fights just aren't as big of sells for the most part. There have been a handful of exceptions, and most of those exceptions involved Conor McGregor when he was fighting at 145. So I think for Holloway, just the opportunity to make what for him would probably be a generational payday may just supersede that. And for McGregor, I don't think moving the ball matters at all for him because, like, it doesn't really matter. I know he loves collecting belts, never defended them, but he loved collecting belts back in the day. But for McGregor, at this point, you got mansions, you got private jets, you got a lot of bills to pay. You have to keep that income coming in. He probably only cares about the money at this point.
Yeah, I got a interesting matchup for you, and it was mentioned in the comments by Alex M. Or not, he mentioned the fighter anyway in the comments. What about Conor versus Islam next year?
Conor McGregor would be better off just never stepping in the octagon again.
It's an awful matchup, obviously, but I think there's a lot of storylines there. Conor, would love to get his hands on Khabib, but can't. What's the next best thing? Beat Khabib's top protege.
True.
Islam is kind of in need of some star power. He's already kind of rising up as kind of like the next big thing. A win over Conor, especially a dominant win over Conor, would put him over the top as an international superstar. Just like Khabib's star was already high, but once he beat Conor as dominant he became an international superstar. I think Khabib's camp would be for that.
Oh, I'm sure they would be.
Yeah,
they would love. But you know what, I think Conor is so smart. The only way he would ever accept the fight with Islam Makhachev would be if Islam did have a belt. I think that's the only way. Because that, to me, that's an unwinnable fight for Conor McGregor. Like, okay, maybe if they were to fight 10 times, maybe in one of those 10, McGregor could catch him with something really early. but it's virtually unwinnable for him because Islam is just too much of a grinder, too much of a grappler. His strength plays into Conor's weakness, and we've seen that weakness from Conor exploited multiple times in the octagon. So I think Conor's way too smart to take that fight. In fact, if Khabib wasn't a champion, I don't think Conor ever would have taken that fight, right? I think he only did it because, hey, there's a belt. This is a big sell. I'm not saying it's impossible that Conor would ever fight Islam Makhachev. I'm just saying it would only happen, James, if Islam won the belt first. Then all the storylines you talk about would come into play, and you could do the beef Team Khabib versus Conor McGregor, and it would be very sellable. I just think Conor would be smart enough to duck that fight unless there was championship gold on the line. Alex M says Conor would twist him into a pretzel. I think he probably would. But I don't know I don't know, James, if you're saying something, you froze up for a second, but you seem to be back now.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say, yeah, I agree with all that. But there's tons of great matches. I mean, you got Chandler, you got Gaethje. I don't think Gaethje
that would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think Gaethje gets back in the octagon unless it's for a title shot, and he deserves it. He probably should be the next guy, but if Conor jumps him, I think Gaethje will lose his mind.
Now, let me ask you this. If Conor were to fight Michael Chandler, there would be a clear path to victory for Chandler, and it would be use your wrestling, because he does come from a wrestling background, but he has made the conscious decision over and over and over again to abandon his wrestling and just throw haymakers. So, and I think that fighters who have that sort of a spirit, because he's a gunslinger, Michael Chandler, right? And I think he understands that, you know, there are some exceptions, but most of the fans don't pay $70 for these things or pay hundreds of dollars for tickets to watch people wrestle. They pay these exorbitant prices to watch people throw haymakers. That's what he likes to do. Do you think if Chandler got in the octagon with Conor McGregor, he would make the decision to take the easiest path to victory and use his wrestling? Or would he just say, you know what? The fans love me because I scrap. I'm going to scrap. Maybe I'll catch him. Maybe he catches me.
I think he would maybe start that way to make it exciting, and then after getting sparked a couple times, because Conor is very accurate and kind of, you know, feel that power. Because with Conor, it's a different kind of power. Where Gaethje is just he just throws bricks, you know, he just throws heavy. Everything hurts. The kicks hurt. The punches hurt. Conor's more an accuracy, to where he hits you right in the accurate spot, to where you just kind of lose your equilibrium. And before you know it, you know, you're dizzy. So it's a different kind of power, you know, with Conor versus Gaethje. So yeah, I think once he felt that, especially on the accuracy side a couple times, he may go back, you know, at that point he'd go back to his wrestling, and that's kind of his path to win the fight. But it would be an exciting fight. I think that's a natural matchup, and just make it. I mean, you can't make it a number one contender spot because Chandler just lost, but you can make it a number one contender spot for Conor, so to speak, and say, hey, this is your proving ground. Let's see if you deserve to be in that conversation.
Yeah, and Conor, like, he's not unwilling. At least he hasn't been in recent memory to, like, taking kind of special attraction fights. Like, he, you know, when he fought Donald Cerrone. Now, maybe because Donald Cerrone's kind of a legend, so maybe Conor would say, you know, Michael Chandler doesn't bring as much star power to the table, but I think Chandler is pretty powerful, pretty popular these days, I should say. Let me get to because Alex M has been on a tear in the chat, and hello as well to the Finn's Tailgate TFTG, which I think is our guy, Chris, who says, Conor is washed. Please stop, Con Nerd. But Alex M has thrown a lot of possible names of opponents at lightweight. And I'm just going to, James, I'm going to rattle off some names and tell me if you think McGregor would beat any of these guys. And if so, tell me who and how many of these guys. So we've seen.
Are we going 5 rounds or 3? That makes a difference to me with Conor.
Does make a difference. I'm assuming any Conor fight would be 5 rounds because it's probably going to be a main or a special co-main. It'd probably a main because I can't imagine Conor not fighting in a main. So it's always going to be 5 rounds. All right. Gotcha. So I'll throw out some names. We already talked about some of these, but Islam Makhachev. I'll rattle these off and you tell me which of these guys Conor beats. Okay. Islam Makhachev, Brian Ortega, Alex Volkanovski, who's the featherweight champion, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson. Do you think Conor beats any of these guys?
I think he could beat Tony Ferguson at this point.
I agree because Tony is washed.
Yeah, I think Tony's on the tail end of this, and you know, probably better for him to kind of sit sit out for a while, if not, for the rest of his career. But Islam, I think that's a really tough matchup. Who are some of the other guys you mentioned?
Well, here's another we could throw in. Beneil Dariush. I think Conor gets waxed there as well. Let me see. Who are the other ones I named? Let me see. Islam, Gaethje, Chandler.
Yeah, he doesn't beat Gaethje. Michael Chandler, I think that's closer to a 50-50 fight.
It is.
Especially if Chandler takes the tough guy route and just says, hey, let's see.
Oh, I think I might have lost James.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there you are. There you are. Oh, I think I'm losing him again. Oh man, let me go through while he's getting his connection sorted. Oh, I think he's back. James, are you there? Oh, I think we're going in and out quite a bit. You might need to disconnect and reconnect here. So I want to go through. Probably turn it off and reconnect. That usually fixes it. So here's what Max Holloway said. He told TMZ Sports that the next opponent for McGregor after he comes back from snapping his leg could very well be him, because according to Holloway, he is on the quote unquote short list to fight the Notorious One. I would love to know who else is on that short list. I would imagine that several of the names we have just talked about would probably be on that short list, but yeah, I would love to know where he sits on that. All right, James is back, and I want to let everybody know that in a few minutes, probably in about 5 minutes, we are going to talk again. This is a 5 rounds follow-up, because last week we spoke to my pal and everybody's pal now, Elliot Brownstein, who is a photog / videographer / radio guy who also trains MMA and occasionally fights amateur. So we talked to him, James, a couple of days before his fight at Rise of a Warrior this past weekend in Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, one of those two. I always get them mixed up. And he won. He won his fight by submission. I saw the video of it. He looked great. He is now 3-0 in amateur. So I cannot wait to talk again with Elliot and just kind of get his thoughts on how that went down. Because I'm always fascinated, James, because when we bring fighters on, we typically bring on lifers. Like, we bring on career guys who have known from a very young age that they've wanted to fight for a living, and they train for it 24/7 like thoroughbreds. I find it fascinating when we talk to somebody who it's really a hobby for him, right? And he even said he doesn't want to go pro. He just wants to do the occasional amateur fights. Because to me, it's like fighting, it's such an interesting thing to moonlight in, right? I mean, a lot of people, you may play like softball games with your friends or pick up basketball, soccer on the weekends. I don't know too many people who just like dabble in fighting. I know a lot of people who are completely out or completely in. So I always find his perspective fascinating.
Yeah, and fighting's so interesting because I can't imagine it being very fun unless you're winning. You know what I mean? It's not one of those things where, playing basketball, you win some, you lose some, all good. Playing flag football or tennis or pickleball or whatever, golf, golf, you lose a lot in golf. But it's so much fun for people. Yeah, me too. I'm awful at golf. But, you keep swinging away and hacking away. But fighting seems like an awful, awful sport if you're losing. So, so to do it as a hobby, not something that you train with 24/7 and things like that. That takes a ton of courage. So props to him.
Absolutely. Now, before Elliot's going to join us in a little bit, I want to go through the social media fight between Nate Diaz, my guy, Ben Askren, and Jake Paul. Okay, so this whole exchange started with BJ Penn. I don't know if BJ runs the account or not, because it's the bjpenn.com account. I'm never sure if it's BJ running it or if it's just his website, but they tweeted out a quote from Ben Askren, I think was on with Joe Rogan. And Askren, you remember, the former UFC and Bellator champion who boxed Jake Paul and he lost, which really wasn't that surprising, because Askren, I don't think I've ever seen a guy throw a punch in an MMA fight. Like, he's the farthest thing from an MMA striker. So when he was interviewed recently, he admitted that Jake Paul, in his words, is kind of good at boxing. And then Nate Diaz responded to that tweet and said, coming from a retired wrestler who can't fight or box. And then Jake Paul responded to Diaz and said, you have 6 times as many losses as Ben Askren. Let that sink in. And then Nate responded to Jake Paul and said, he sucks, Jake. You get smoked in a real fight, though. You can't really fight. Boxing matches with wrestlers only. Let that sink in. So, and there were a couple more tweets, but and then Jake Paul said, I own the entire city of Stockton. Let that sink in. I think that's bullshit. I don't think there's any way that that Jake Paul is more popular in Stockton than the Diaz brothers. But I thought that was fantastic, and we'll bring in Elliot in a moment. But James, Diaz kind of has a point there, right? Because Jake Paul, this undefeated boxer, his boxing matches to this point have been against retired NBA players and retired or washed up MMA fighters. Like this is, he hasn't proven yet he's a real boxer.
Yeah, he's selectively picking his opponents, but I don't have a problem with that. There's a lot of, especially in boxing, the first 10 fights or so, if you're a prospect, they're managing these guys' careers. That's why there's so many fighters that are 10-0, 12-0 coming up, because they hand select opponents that, that they feel they know they can beat to kind of prove their worth. And then, eventually you got to take some chances. So that's just the boxing game. But I think this might be setting it up for a Paul Diaz fight. Who wouldn't want to see that?
I love it.
And the other thing, Nate always brings this up about, a real fight, like, what does that mean? Does that mean, when you're at the bar and you're in a street fight, or you run into somebody on the corner in the mean streets of Stockton, or, what is this real fight stuff that Nate always brings up? Because really the UFC is about as real as it gets within the rules, without eye gouging and throwing trash cans and all, crazy stuff in bottles.
I think that's what he means. I think he means step into the octagon. Or you know what? In this context, I think that can include boxing. I think all he means in this context is, you've got, like, talking to Jake Paul, you've got a very lucrative contract with Showtime Boxing, and he's going to be fighting Tommy Fury up next, who I think is Tyson's like half brother or quarter brother or something. So like he's getting closer to real competition as he moves along. But I think all Nate is saying there is, if you're now a professional boxer, fight other professional boxers. Instead, you're fighting basketball players and wrestlers. So I think a quote unquote real fight would be fight someone who's actually trained to box.
Got you. Okay. Well, he's getting there. Give him a few more fights. If he gets past Fury, put Nate in there. I'll pay to see that. That'll be a good fight. And Nate's contract is up after his next fight, so
yeah,
he'd be free to do whatever.
And I agree with poop slap in the comments, who said Diaz looking for a payout. I want Nate to give him that Stockton slap. Oh man, I would love that as well. Let's bring in our guest, and we had to bring this man back because I'd like to think we gave him good luck before this past weekend. There it is. Congrats. And he went out there, the Reaper. He is now 3-0 in amateur MMA. And bro, I appreciate you sending out the video. You won the fight by submission, which is great. First of all, how good did it feel to get a stoppage? Because it's one thing to win a fight. It's got to be another thing to feel your opponent tap and get your hand raised that way.
Yeah, and I've never had that in my life. Many boxing bouts, 2 previous MMA fights before that, it's always gone to decision. I've never been that knockout guy. And I was generally surprised. I said, what? I couldn't believe it.
Well, talk us through it, because how did you end up catching him and getting that tap?
I listened to my coaches, and that's the biggest thing, is that you got to have good corner people and good coaches, trainers throughout your camp and during the fight. It's, I didn't do what I had to do in that first round. And I sat down and my coach said, he's like, listen, sit down, set up the takedown, get those jabs pumping, get those punches going. And he's like, and you'll get where you have to go. And that's exactly what happened. I set up the jabs, hit him with a good right hook that backed him up to the fence and, or to the cage. And, I was able to, he flipped me over, and then he tried to do a takedown. So I just kind of put my weight on top of him. And that's the difference between us big guys. We just kind of use our weight. And I was able to get on top of him, try to get some control in there. And honestly, it was just kind of a thing of beauty where I was trying to get control, and I saw he let up just slightly, and I was like, all right, just go for it.
Elliot, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe last week we talked about there was a long layoff in between, this fight and your previous fight. Did you feel any rust coming in, or were you concerned about that? Or just tell me about that part in terms of the ring rust, octagon rust that coming in?
I'll tell you, I was very calm, cool, and collected throughout the day. Kind of just joking around with the other guys and just kind of having fun, trying to ease my nerves a little bit. I will say, going in that first round, the nerves got to me where I didn't stick with the game plan per se. It was until he had me down in a vulnerable position where I had to really kind of click it into gear. And I think knowing that I lost that first round to the judges, that really kicked it into gear. Where that second round was like, all right, listen, you already lost one round, you have to win the next two. So that's what really changes it.
We're joined here by the undefeated Elliot the Reaper Brownstein, who I'm happy we could say that. And it's funny because James and I were talking about something, and like you probably can't even relate to this because you haven't lost. Like as far as I'm sure that getting in the cage and fighting mixed martial arts, it's a lot of fun when you're getting your hand raised. And I would imagine, you've been vested in training before, unless you're like secretly the biggest stud on the planet. Maybe no one has ever gotten the best of you in training, but like, it's a lot of fun when you're winning. Like, have you ever even like allowed yourself to mentally prepare for the idea of how would it feel if I lost?
I think that's what, like I said last week, that's what pushes me forward to not lose. It's knowing it's like, wow, what if you do lose? Like, is this what you want to keep on doing? Because a lot of people lose and then they quit, they drop off, they leave. It's that loss that really is like, I don't want to do this anymore because I just lost. And I love it when we win, but when we lose, I'm out of here. It's like the Fairweather fans, for sports. It's like, they leave, they don't watch the games anymore. I think losing that first round, which is not something I hadn't lost a round in 5 years. I've won all my fights unanimously. I've dominated, and losing that first round to, I would say a weaker opponent or someone that doesn't have a winning record, it was tough for me to get that. I was like, wow, I went in there knowing that I was going to win, and I just lost a round. And I have to pick it up. It was very tough for me to hit that, and that's what's got to keep you going. It's got to move you forward. Losing is what they say. It's not losing; it's learning.
Elliot, how did you celebrate the win that night? Did you do anything, or did you just nurse your wounds, or what did you do that night after the win?
Yeah, as you can see, a little bit of a black eye right here.
I didn't even really notice until you showed it. Yeah, but it's not too bad.
I felt great. I wasn't gassed at all. It was a quick second round, so my wife got me a couple drinks and we Ubered home.
Nice.
It was a good one.
Nice.
Oh man, Elliot the Reaper Brownstein is with us, and you can answer this better than me because from the camera angle I saw in the video, it looked like an arm triangle. What was it that you caught him in?
It was actually just a pressure control. Surprisingly, I was able to get that in. It did look like an arm triangle where, you kind of get him in a good chokehold. But honestly, what I was trying to do is I was in top and I was just trying to center line that up and get my head underneath his chin. And he made the mistake of turning his head away as I'm trying to do that. So my forehead was into his jawline. And I had good arm position, and I was able to just squeeze that in there and put that pressure right onto his jawline, and he tapped right away.
Elliot, we have a question in the comments for you. I'll read it from Alex M. It says, what was going through your mind as you walked to the cage? From Alex M.
Win. It was there was a lot. It was just, kind of, I walked. I was still joking around tonight. I mean, the ref, asked me if I had my cup on. I told him to feel it, and I was still joking around.
Did he?
Time. No, he did not. He's like, I'm not doing that. And but it still was a lot of nerves. I had major tunnel vision, and tunnel vision is good because you wipe out the crowd. You listen to you hear for your coaches, and I just think it was too much tunnel vision at the time. I had no focus going into that first round, and that's why I said getting my face kind of pummeled in that first round helped out because it really locked me into gear. My thoughts were honestly just, they say you can't think of nothing, but I honestly had no thoughts going through my head.
Now, so I got to ask you, what's next? You going to do this again? And if so, I want to come out to the next one. I couldn't make it out to this one. Maybe if you do something not during football season, I can get out there.
We got to see. We got to talk to the wife, make sure. She had like about 4 anxiety attacks because the fight before us was a great women's fight, MMA, for my friends over at Homestead, Felix Sponcierga over at Full Contact Fitness in Homestead, and that the one girl's nose got broken, and
Wow.
my wife was just thinking, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. So there's a lot of nerves going through with her. So I got to ask her permission first.
Well, fair enough, man. And of course, let us know as soon if you get something lined up. Let us know, and we want to be, if not literally, at least figuratively, in your corner for the next one.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, best of luck with everything. Elliot the Reaper Brownstein, thank you so much for taking the time, man, and we'll have you on again, man. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Hold on. Let me get one more.
Oh.
Alex M wants another question here. What was your post-fight meal, and how important is the wifey to your fight preparations?
Well, to answer the wife question, she was great. She suffered through the long nights and long hours of training, weekends, nights, and she was just, we have 3 kids, and she took care of all that, and
That's awesome.
she was amazing. It's, I couldn't have done this without her, especially with 3 kids. And my post-fight meal, I think I had a hot dog. And,
nice.
Yeah. And then I think, you know what? And then I had like 4 slices of pizza. I just kept eating. Yeah.
I don't blame you, man.
Yeah,
It was worth the celebration.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I love it, man. Elliot, thank you so much, man. We'll talk to you again. Have a great night and a great happy Thanksgiving, by the way.
Yep.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving, guys. Tell Frank
Likewise.
I will. Yeah, we gave Frank the night off tonight. Real quick, James, and I got a Thanksgiving question for you. But first, couple of recaps from this past weekend. So turned out to be a couple of excellent fights, but Ketlen Vieira did some work on Miesha Tate's face, and I was a little bit worried for Ketlen because it was somewhat obvious she was winning the fight because she was landing the cleaner, better punches. And then in the 5th round, she rearranged Miesha Tate's nose, and she was an absolute bloody mess. But Miesha, she went out on her shield. Miesha was more aggressive. She was the one charging forward. She landed some good punches of her own, was working in her wrestling a little bit. So if you're going by the octagon control angle of it, Miesha was a bit more assertive. Ketlen Vieira was just better. And so I thought the judges got it right giving her that decision. And then also, I feel kind of bad for Miesha. And I have to wonder if she was focused enough on what was right in front of her, because we talked last week about her quotes about how, she had this plan of she was going to fight for the belt again. And it was a dream to fight Ronda Rousey again. And it's maybe next time, even in interviews, don't talk about what comes after this. Just focus on your opponent.
Yeah, as far as the fight, man, I immediately after the fight, I thought Tate won the fight, but
Alex M felt the same way.
And I didn't watch it a second or third time, to kind of see how, round by round, but I felt Tate was pressing the action the entire time, and that Ketlen could have been more aggressive. I mean, she was obviously the stronger fighter. Her punches were obviously doing more damage. When Tate connected, it was just kind of brushing off. When Vieira connected, it was doing heavy damage. And you saw Miesha Tate's eye, pretty much closed at the end of the fight. So it was one of those things to where, whoever won the fight, you couldn't really, I wouldn't have put up a big debate either way. I thought Tate might have won a close one, but more so by points. I think Vieira did much more damage, to that fight, in that fight. And I thought about that immediately after the fight for Tate too. I kind of felt bad for her in terms of where does she go from here? That her road was already going to be a long one. And she probably was going to have to win, 3 fights, 4 fights to even be considered, in title contention. And now I don't think she gets in title contention. I mean, she probably has to win 4 or 5 in a row, which is very hard to do, especially at her age in this stage of her career. I don't really know where she goes from here. I say put her in some, fights against big names, but not necessarily highly ranked, opponents, and kind of see. But she clearly has something left in the tank. She put up a good fight. Some people can say she won, against a top 7 ranked opponent. So it was a good fight. I was entertained. It was a good fight. Both fighters came to fight for sure.
And the co-main was entertaining as well, very entertaining. And I'll give credit to Alex M, because I remember saying at the end of last week that, and I think he was watching the segment that I did with Lee Sterling, where we did some fight picks on my daily show on Friday, and Lee went with Chiesa. I actually agreed, and Chiesa, if there had been maybe 2 more rounds to that 3-round fight, Chiesa maybe would have won the fight, because Sean Brady, I think, did tire himself out a little bit. But Brady over Chiesa, that was an impressive performance in his biggest fight to date for Sean Brady. His grappling was the difference. And I've never seen Chiesa out grappled to that degree. So that is very, very impressive. He landed several takedowns, had Chiesa's back working for chokes from much of the second round and the third round. Chiesa, though, had flurries of strikes, even landed a takedown late in the third round, and really just ran out of time, because who knows, what would have happened if he had championship rounds there and main event rounds, and he didn't. So I came away somewhat impressed with both guys. Obviously more impressed with Sean Brady, because nobody does that to Michael Chiesa, but also really impressed with Chiesa for being that competitive, given how lopsided it looked for moments of that fight.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I took from that fight was, look who was outside the cage watching the fight. Did you notice? The champion, Kamaru Usman, was there watching that fight.
No, I didn't realize that.
I thought was very interesting. I'm like, obviously he's not there to see Michael Chiesa. I don't think. Yeah. I think he was kind of watching to see, okay, who's this next hotshot prospect in my division that people are talking about. I've if I'm Usman, he's saying he's obviously cleaned out the division. He's starting to lap the division twice. He's looking for fresh blood, and not saying that Brady is anywhere near at this point. I don't think he, is there in 2022. But look, if he wins, 2, 3, more fights, and Usman is still the champ, I think Usman, might have a new contender. He needs fresh blood. He needs some new names, in the division. Obviously, Chimaev is the next hot shot there, but I think after Chimaev, Brady is probably the next biggest prospect, in his division. And with Usman at this point, you got to think long term, because he's beaten everybody, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that a year from now he's still the champion with 2 more wins under his belt. So you got to start looking at prospects for him to fight, because he's beaten everybody already at the top.
And last one, real quick, I wanted to get to the curtain jerker of the main card, because Alex M made me think about this when he talked about, not completely agreeing with the scorecards on the Miesha Tate Ketlen Vieira fight. Talk about scorecards. So in the first fight of the main card, Adrian Yanez, who just really put on a striking clinic, but against a very game Davy Grant. I mean, Davy Grant was taking a lot of punishment. Yanez technique was perfect, fluid, landing a ton of clean punches. I mean, it was obvious to me that Yanez won the fight, but Grant had some impressive flurries. And I love Davy Grant's combinations, how he ends so many of them with kicks. I think it's really fun to watch, because not a whole lot of guys do that these days. And landed, or at least came close to landing some good jumping knees in the fight as well. So I thought it was a competitive fight, but I thought it was a clear victory for Adrian Yanez. And you actually had, somehow this was a split decision. And not only was it a split decision, but the judge that went for Grant gave him all 3 rounds. That is criminally bad judging, criminally bad. So split decision, Yanez 29-28, 29-28, Yanez, the rightful winner. And then Davy Grant got a 30-27 scorecard. Like, I hope whoever the judge it was, and I could have found the name, but I just, whichever judge that it was, like, I hope that person is held accountable for that. Like, I hope that, that the Nevada Athletic Commission looks at that and says, like, hey, make us understand what you saw there, and maybe you should sit a few fights out, okay?
Yeah, they need to have a...
Ooh, I think we might have frozen James again. Well, you know what? Oh, you're back. Maybe. For freezing a little bit again. Well, you know what? I did want to, I did want to anyway. I wanted to wrap it up. We got to get out a little bit early tonight, because I've actually got to do some last minute shopping for a few Thanksgiving side dishes. Okay. and I think I have James back. James, is there anything part of like the traditional Thanksgiving spread where you say, I'm not going to bother with this? Like, I'm not a fan of cranberry sauce on turkey, and I'm also not a fan of the sweet potato casserole. So those two things, I can throw them right in the garbage.
Yeah, cranberry sauce, that's a good one. Eggnog, I could do without a little bit.
I could do without that too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I'm not really a big turkey guy, man. I like turkey bacon.
I'm not either. Yeah.
That's about it. But I mean, do you fry it? I've seen people fry the turkey, bake the turkey. Thanksgiving food is really just not that's not my jam overall.
Yeah, like, and I think Alex said this in the chat as well. Like, we do have a turkey as part of the spread. Oh, and by the way, he's 100% right. I know it's going to be chaos. If you head to Publix now, you're in trouble. I know. I know that it's not going to be fun. But turkey is gains. Oh, it's our guy Jonathan Ramlakan is in the chat. Hello, Jonathan. Up? Hello, Johnny. We have turkey as part of the spread, but usually there's something else, like a nice roast pork, which is fantastic. And I'm not even Latino, but Italians do like pork as well. So usually there's some pork as part of the spread, some kind of a pasta dish. So that's going to be the way to go. And you know what, my friends, I'll tell you, you want to know what else is better than traditional Thanksgiving food? The food you're going to find at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. That is my jam right there. Guys, sometimes I just want all the fresh seafood on my plate. I love the seafood at the Quarterdeck, the sushi, the fresh mahi, the buffalo shrimp. Everything is so good there. Other times, you may not be feeling the seafood. They've got everything, man. The chicken wings are awesome. I've been eating the buffalo wings at Quarterdeck for years. A couple weeks ago at a Quarterdeck watch party, a 5 Reasons Sports watch party, I tried for the first time the teriyaki glazed chicken wings. Those were excellent. I'm going to have those again, I think, the next time that I get out there. The sandwiches and burgers are awesome, man. The All-American burger, it's so good. The jerk chicken sandwich is amazing. The French dip beef sandwich with the au jus dipping sauce is awesome. The Quarterdeck is also a great spot to wet your whistle. The 2-for-1 happy hour is all day, every day. That drink special never ends, my friends. And if you go out there for college football Saturdays and NFL Sundays, you can take advantage of the 5 for $15 ice cold buckets of imported beer, high noon hard seltzer, or mix and match those to your heart's content. There is something for everybody at the Quarterdeck, and it's a great place to watch all the games and to watch every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge. They never charge a cover for the UFC pay-per-view fight. So if you want to find the location nearest to you or peep their menu before you go, check them out on the web at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. And how about this? I think Alex does it right. No turkey in my family. Rice, beans, pork, and a bunch of indigestion. I can relate to that part of it. And liquor. That's the way to go. Usually we don't bust out the hard stuff on Thanksgiving, but there's going to be some beer, probably some wine as well. Listen, I had an awesome time as always. James, if you want to let the people know, well, they can see your Twitter handle. Anywhere else they should know? You use Instagram, anywhere else they can find you?
Nope, pretty much only on Twitter, and even then, I've kind of laid off the Twitter a little bit since leaving my reporting days. So yeah, at James Walker NFL, hit me up, follow, DM, whatever you need to do. I'm there.
I love it. Follow me on Twitter at Alex Donno, Donno spelled Donno, and follow Frank as well. Frank was busy with family stuff tonight, which is understandable. Big day tomorrow. Follow Frank at RealFrank_Z on Twitter. He made his account private for no reason, but you have to request a follow, and then in like 2 months, he'll figure out how to follow you back. So just do that. Request a follow. He will accept the request eventually, and will probably follow you back. And a huge shout out to Frank Zaffere. And yes, happy Thanksgiving. Hope everyone has a great day with family, watching football. And then, the UFC takes this weekend off. We're going to have Font versus Aldo the following weekend. So we will talk about that next week. We'll be back on Thursday night for another episode of he's washing his blue button-ups. The shirts. Oh, man. We will talk to everybody next time on another episode of 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.